In today's episode of Ampersand featuring Ashira Lavine, we dive into and unpack her gift of reading people and the role it's played in her past life as a special criminal investigator for the government to her role now as an intuitive healer. We talk about how she made this massive transition, the power of simply noticing the breath, practicing awareness. One of the biggest secrets in life, and spoiler alert, it's self-compassion, and some of her tips and techniques for reading yourself, practicing neutrality, and being present to and reading others. This is a super exciting and wonderful conversation, and I thoroughly hope you enjoy it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ampersand. My name is Jenny. Ampersand is a podcast about the integration of all parts of yourself and how beautiful life is when you do so. Today, I have this wonderful guest on with me, Ashira Lavine. Let me go ahead and read her bio. Ashira reads people for a living and has been for more than 20 years. Although she currently reads people as an intuitive healer, previous roles include reading people as a special agent criminal investigator, as well as deputy director for the federal government, a world champion poker player, an undefeated competitive martial arts fighter, yoga and meditation teacher, energy breath worker, trauma resolution breath worker, and massage therapist. She reads body language, microexpressions of the face, verbal and written language, and voice. Some might say she reads minds because of her ability to identify thoughts and thinking patterns, being able to predict where someone has been, the likelihood of where someone is going, and what's likely to happen in the physical, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Her ability to have both broad and specific insight into the mind and body, as well as knowledge of transformational practices, allows her to support people making profound change in their life, body, and health. Welcome to my show, Ashira.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jenny.
Of course. Well, my first question is, how does someone go from being a special agent criminal investigator to becoming an intuitive healer?
Well, let's see. I would say that my skills of reading people, which were sparked from a number of things, probably based in some trauma somewhere along the lines, but that led me down one career path. And then I was in a pretty stressful situation for the last year and a half of my career that resulted in me having some physical injury, I might say mental and emotional too. And it laid me up for about a solid year in bed, healing and recovering from both just surgery and mental and physical ailments. And I didn't know anything about the mind-body world. I would say I just was into Western medicine, pills, talk therapy. Numbing out of my phone would be the third skill that I would have added to that. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of frustration with the results. Mm-hmm. So that's when things accidentally came about for me. To be honest, and it's not, I pick and choose with whom I share this, but this is a good as time as any. I went through a period where I just really was in too much pain in every sense of the word. And I just wanted to end things. And to make a long story short, I was challenged to give life one more year. And I took that as a challenge to heal. I figured that was the least I could do for those who loved me. And the first thing I did, I was what you call agoraphobic. Like I was afraid to go outside for that first year that I was healing. And I think I just felt so vulnerable physically and mentally. But I decided to pull myself up by the bootstraps and went to a place right down the street from where I was living and to start to heal my physical body. So I went to where I knew from my former life. I went to a UFC gym, and you'd mentioned in my bio that I was formerly a competitive fighter, and that was just one of the styles, that kind of no rules fighting that I had done, and that was the world that I knew. But I went in there, I couldn't hit a thing, and I walked out of the place and I just threw my hands up and I'm like, what am I going to do? And there was this plaque hanging down the hall that said yoga. And I was like, yoga? I think I took a class in that in college. And so I go down there, I end up getting a private lesson from the manager who was there, and I'm like, oh, this is the kindest thing I've ever experienced. Meanwhile, it was hot power yoga, which is super funny. And that began with the body, and soon after, a colleague of mine from advanced interview and interrogation training, who was a big meditator, said, come with me to this silent meditation retreat at Spirit Rock out in California. And so with a lot of assistance and special permissions, I was escorted from my boyfriend at the time, who had later became my husband, and took me right up to the gate. My friend in California picked me right up at the gate, and that was the beginning of a profound mental and emotional healing. I didn't even know what meditation meant, but by the end of that week, things had really broken open for me, and I, to this day, have stayed with these practices every day pretty much since January 2015. The meditation really helped heal my brain and release trauma in a very gentle and organic way. So then I did things to expedite my own healing because I felt like I was on a timeline that year. So I went into yoga teacher training, I went to meditation teacher training, and then I started using different types of Eastern medicine to help heal my body. So acupuncture, qigong, other types of body work, massage therapy, biodynamic cranial sacral therapy, which I also am certified in. So these are all things that I had done really just to help my brain, body, and spirit heal. And then organically, I entered into this world because I felt compelled to share with people the freedom that is possible. I did not see a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I had flown out west and said goodbye to some of my family. Like, I was quite serious, and determined. And I turned that same thinking that, it wasn't possible. There was just barely that shred of just attempting to do what seemed impossible, and then to get to the other side and to not just have healed all these parts of myself from the traumas at the end of my agent career, but also from my whole life. I had gone into the front windshield of a car in a head-on collision when I was 5, and I had paralysis to the left side of my face. And when I smiled, this side didn't really move. There wasn't movement around the eye, and I also limped my whole life since I was 17 from a car accident that I had then. 9 months into yoga, although doctors said I would need assistance walking for life, not only did I stop using assisted walking devices, I also regained control over my face soon thereafter. So I even had my dental work done where things were created at an angle just to straighten things out, and now I'm straight, and what are you going to do? But it just healing 40-some-year-old paralysis, healing 25-year-old limp, healing autoimmune conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, leaky gut, chronic headaches and migraines for over 12 years, healing these things, and insomnia for over 2 decades. I mean, how can I, through all of these natural methods, how could I not share this with people? I want people to have freedom. I want people to know that they have the ability within themselves, if they have the desire to heal, that this is possible. And I also went into a lot of different, I went into a lot of trauma training as well, and had an absolutely incredible teacher in this area who, if we put some resources down there, I would like to put Bridget Vixen's in there and her alchemical alignment, because it's a brilliant combination of different somatic experiencing work. And that was an important aspect too, having the sensitivity and awareness around people's nervous systems and what really helps people feel safe, which I'm mentioning this now in part because we're gonna end up addressing this again later. That's the main story of how I ended up falling into this work, and then it was a real heart-centered development from there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I truly feel so honored that you're able to share this story here with me and with our listeners, and it really does sound like you are a living example of what is possible through these healing modalities, where you are getting in touch with these parts of yourself that you didn't realize you could change with, like, some of the injuries you've been through, whether emotional, physical, psychological, physical. But I do want to kind of go back, since there's so much to unpack around, like, your initial story, and then just like stumbling upon a yoga sign and being like, oh, this is a sign that I meant to practice, and this is like the way in which I can start to heal. But are you open to sharing some of the kind of challenges or pain that you underwent in that kind of you said you were bedridden for a year?
Yeah, I had been in a situation that the main situation, I guess, would be, you might call it severe hazing. And so I had, in one of the final attacks, I was just wondering how detailed to tell this story. It's funny, so I'm going to tell it all. 25 years earlier, or in my early 20s, during the competitive fighting, whenever I used to train, I was much less experienced than a lot of the people against whom I competed. However, the reason that I would win is because every time I wanted to give up, I heard a voice say, what if this was it? What if this was it? And all of a sudden I would just get this burst of energy. Wow. And think the tables would turn. So fast forward, actually, it was almost exactly 20 years. And I'm in a situation, I was restrained and blacking out, and all of a sudden I hear, this is it. This is it. And I just like with all my power kicked out of this situation and broke free. And fortunately, an intuitive line came to me at that time to say to this individual that got them to stop coming at me, and where I had said something about that somebody in particular was with that person right now, and stating that this wasn't them, and it really hit this person who it meant quite a bit, apparently, that I didn't know this individual that I said was there with them. So that was fortunate, but it was that, I found it really interesting that, 20 years later now I'm hearing that phrase, and it gave me that power, and that resulted in a unique type of ankle break, and I had to have a fusion in my foot and my ankle, and had several surgeries from that. So, and I wasn't supposed to walk for 3 months, or total bed for 3 months, but it ended up being a lot longer because I had been on a lot of prescription medications for 20 to 24 years, depending. I mean, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, amphetamines for ADHD, sleeping pills to combat those, painkillers in just several of those years, not the whole time, but you just start to get blocked, and it's like your body, if you're not dealing with the emotional pain, it becomes physical. And so there were a lot of heavy duty medications that I'd been on a long time, and I was a bit of an extremist and so I just sort of went off a lot of those things all at once, and it really threw my body for a loop. I mean, when you're on, those types of medications, the side effects can be pretty dramatic. So I was pretty ill for months, it's like, even if you put the mental aside, between really getting off unintentional addiction and recovering from the surgeries. So that was part of what kept me in bed, both the ankle break and the mental sense of I don't feel safe in the world,
Yeah. Wow. You've had a number of life and death situations.
Actually, I have. I once I started counting and doing art pictures for each one, and I think I got up to 7 before where I almost died in multiple instances.
Right.
It's it's interesting. It's a bit of a pattern, I'd say, up until now.
Yes, you broke the pattern.
Now.
But there was this intuitive voice, that kept telling you, nudging you and letting you know that you're meant to be here, that, the question of is this it, right? Is this really going to be it? And supporting you in breaking free and reconnecting with that light within yourself, the sense of purpose, that these challenges were here to kind of make you stronger, but also enable you to serve others, it sounds like.
It became about a life of service after that. I mean, we're just going back to the passion of, showing other people the way. I mean, I love to help support people with transformation and personal growth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Freeing themselves from the ties that bind.
Physical, right? Or emotional or mental.
All of them. I used to have OCD that was pretty, I would say every day I was probably adding to the physical cellular stress of my body through obsessive compulsive behaviors with cleanliness and that was the main behavior. There were some other ones too, but I got over. I helped myself and then also some others heal from conditions that are, I would think, obsessive compulsive disorder is quite challenging to heal from. And it took a few years, but once I focused on it and I really dug deep and looked at what was at the core of it, and in addition to that, created safety, continued safety for myself, that really helped to free me from a mental state that had been imprisoning me. I just don't, because I value freedom so highly, I don't want to ever feel like that with prescription meds or with mental thoughts or something that I don't want anything to control me. I value that freedom, so I do the work that it takes in order to have the greatest amount of peace in my mind and body.
And yeah, it really sounds like you've done a lot of work, and it's like going through these like layers of like being in these issues that naturally arise. So I guess kind of taking a step back, what was the first kind of big piece of like trauma work or like work that you did on yourself? And can you walk us through like that kind of experience and journey?
The big piece of work that I did on myself, do you mean like the experience that I had?
Experience, like, yeah, experience. And what was like really the first,
okay,
I know you mentioned yoga, but like what was that kind of like first body of work or works that you did on yourself?
Going to the meditation retreat, there was a breakthrough there that, and they're all tied in with a particularly difficult incident where I could potentially have lost my life. And I hadn't been able to see it prior to creating the safety in the body through work like meditation and breathing. So my first group breathwork session, this is how I became inspired. This is what inspired me to become a professional breathworker. My first group breath session resulted in a major trauma release where, although I was conscious of where I was in present time, my body was reacting to fighting something that I was unable to fight at the time.
Wow.
And so I was screaming like at the top of my lungs, but I was also at the same time trying to communicate to the teacher, like, I'm okay, like I'm aware of where I am. But it was like I was trying to bark it out in between screams. It was a bit amusing, and observed the body enacting, doing things to complete actions, like I said, that I couldn't then. And what happened after that was I had been having panic and anxiety attacks every day, multiple times a day for about a year at this point. And although I felt like I recalled everything that had happened to me, and I thought, I don't really understand why I'm having this level of fear and anxiety, considering everything that I remember. And on this particular day, I saw what it was that was causing that. And after that, I think I had one mild panic attack that's very quickly just fizzled out, and that was it, and I was done, and never since. And that was back in early 2015. So, and now here we are at the end of 2023.
Wow, that's powerful. That sounds like such a transformative breathwork experience for you to have like relived that and been able to, essentially, you said, like process and react in such a way that you weren't able to act in that moment. That sounds incredibly healing.
I'm going to digress for a moment to share with you something that I believe that you might be curious about, which is that's actually the answer to how certain healing happens. In all of my trainings, a consistent theme is doing nothing, right? Creating setting, creating safety in the space and in the relationship for someone to feel comfortable enough to let go, and then supporting the body in some way to allow the body to do its own natural healing. So I've had instances where it's appeared as though I have helped someone spontaneously heal from some sort of chronic injury or pain. But really what, and I'll give you an example. This 80-some-year-old woman had come to me for chronic pain she had had for over a year in her her leg and hip. And she had fallen off a scooter. She'd never had surgery before in her life, but she'd fallen off this scooter. And when I came into the room, and she was, because I'm also, if people didn't know, you did say licensed massage therapist. So, she was semi-dressed on the table, arms down, in her bra. Okay, go ahead. And I'm like, no. I was like, I'm not going to work like this. And she's like, oh, it's fine, I'm fine. Anyway, I did some things around boundary repair to help her feel more comfortable, and in time she became relaxed. And I was doing a lot of craniosacral holds on her, which is just still touch at certain key points to support the relaxing of the nervous system. And so I'm at her head, and she's kind of in a deeply relaxed state, and I said, and I see a little twitch in this foot and leg that was bothering her. And I said, I just want you to stay relaxed. Don't try to do or change anything. And, you just kind of see her foot just begin to unwind.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, she just pops up and she goes, oh my God, it stopped. The pain has stopped. And she's like, is this for real? And she jumps off the table. And
wow.
And the thing is, this you can hear very clearly how this was not me doing anything other than really holding space. This is allowing the body to complete an action that it couldn't complete at the time, which can cause a looping in the brain, and that's tied in with our pain sensors, and then all of a sudden it's kicked out, and there's freedom, and that loop is gone, and it's back to resuming normal health. And so I think we learn all these things in this healing work, only to come back to doing nothing.
Not nothing, but for some people it feels like that, right? And I think what you said resonates so much, this idea that sometimes all it takes truly, right, is holding space and making someone feel safe enough. And I really like this analogy of closing this loop, and when the loop is closed, there's nothing left to be done. It's done. The body, the mind doesn't need to repeat that cycle anymore. And that's such a beautiful story. And are there any other stories you're willing to share around kind of supportive spaces you've been able to hold for others, and other forms of healing you've been able to facilitate?
Earlier you had asked me about, sharing a story about someone who had to have major surgery and then didn't. And again, I want to be super clear that this could be coincidence, okay? Or, that this is not me. I want to be clear about that. So, because this is really more about what one can do, an agency that they can take in order to facilitate their own healing. So a guy came to me in preparation, in year advanced preparation for a major heart procedure. And he religiously came in every week. We would do an hour breath work combined with some body work to just open. The body work was related to breathing deeper, right? Diaphragm, chest, just certain opening. Mm-hmm. And a year later, he went back for the pre-surgery testing, and he no longer needed the procedure.
It's incredible. Mm-hmm.
If I know this from my own experience, I can't tell you just sharing a piece of advice with people and then they do it. There are other instances of that where so many people I know who have been told that they need some sort of spinal surgery or a fusion, because of certain compression with the discs and whatnot. And I was one of those too, that doctors told that to. And then I began inverting each day. I got a yoga wall installed for this purpose, so I could just go and hang upside down on the yoga wall, but you can also get a $100 inversion machine. And I started having less and less pain very dramatically. At first I got 2 hours, and then 4 hours, and then a full day, and then 2 days. And it just kept increasing until, no, I don't need surgery. And I've had, I don't know, a few dozen people who had some sort of chronic pain not have that pain anymore. Which, by the way, going back to the heart guy, and I'm going to tell you one more story in a second, he also was really disciplined in his homework and his practices. And it was just a few minutes a day of some sort of, we would have a little fun, and I'd say, I'm going to be your accountability partner here. We'll both do plank for a minute every night, and then we'll do 10 push-ups, and we'll do, and 5 minutes of breathing. So that daily practice, that daily attention within the body is really important. The second story, a childhood friend of mine hired me for some work and coaching for chronic anxiety that she'd had pretty heavy for over 20 years, that she'd never been able to alleviate, and also frustration, anger. Like, she was more irritable with her kids and her family than she wanted to be. And I gave her homework to just notice her breathing, right? To initially, the first few weeks, just observe her breathing. And then a 3 to 5 minute evening, morning or evening practice. So a couple weeks later, she's like, this is incredible. I cannot believe how much things have shifted for me. Her family was noticing, her colleagues at work were noticing. And I said, great. I go, tell me what you've been doing. And she said, well, I've just really been noticing the breath throughout the day. Not even doing anything, okay? Just noticing. And I said, oh, okay, great. And so what about the other practice in the morning and night? She goes, what other practice?
Yeah.
And I'm like, just the power of observation here and paying attention within was enough to shift this woman. And let me tell you, we had a 9-month contract. We had to shift up what we were doing after 2 months. She started driving on the highway again. She hadn't driven on the highway for more than 10 years. She was scared to go off local roads. She was not afraid to go to the doctor. She even had to have a procedure done, and they could not believe they're like, where is our old patient? Like, who are you? I mean, a lot more confidence, patience, calm. It's now been, it might be closer now to 1.5 years since we began. She is still thriving. She does have a daily practice, which might go anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, just depending on how much energy she has. But that mindfulness has stayed, So I love that. These are two people who had a lot of success. And part of the reason is because they just also have that discipline to give themselves, again, even just 5 minutes a day can be profound. And when you add the breathing element to the meditative element, you're really supercharging the results on the brain, hence the body.
I mean, there's so many good takeaways there, like one of them being, to your point, the importance of that discipline, that commitment to your daily practices. I remember this is something that I've had to learn for myself because I have such a deep connection with the plant medicine space that I can't rely on those plant medicines to change my life with the wave of a magic wand. It takes really that commitment, that dedication to myself with observation, with breath work, with other practices that really resonate with me for those messages to really, that insight, that wisdom to really sink in. But then also, sometimes healing is as simple as just pausing and observing. Truly, I think it's so beautiful that this other woman that you helped, it was truly just through the observation that she was able to create this like snowball effect in which she was able to heal so quickly. And then you also talk about the power of breathing. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about like the science of that and the effects on like the physical, mental, emotional, and like spiritual bodies.
You know, I'm gonna give referrals for some fun science.
Sure.
I would say that just generally though, you know, if you remember that by just being in your present moment experience, whatever, you know, noticing the breath right now, noticing the any sensations in the physical body or sound happening in the present moment, that right there you're thickening the frontal cortex, you're thickening the gray matter there, and you're enhancing these areas in your life of learning. So you're learning more easily, of memory. You're able to remember more. You don't forget your keys as much. Self-regulation. You're responding rather than reacting to things. Compassion, self-awareness. You know, these are all areas where your heart organically kind of expands, like your love of self expands, your sensitivity. These are things that increase, and in a very organic way, where you become more gentle. Your inner voice becomes more gentle. That inner critic softens and quiets, and the higher mind, which you know because it's the more positive, loving voice, that voice becomes louder and stronger. I mean, I want to tell you the secret right now. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Don't roll your eyes. Self-love. When you do practices that focus within the body and create that safety and that compassion, that love, you start resonating at a higher level. You start doing things in a way that are more kinder to yourself, and hence you do that with others. And you're also in a space where you're able to be the observer of your own mind and experiences more readily and easily without effort. And then you're able to hear your higher mind's guidance. You're able to feel the guidance from yourself. And you will guide you well when you're doing that from this more healed, clear version of you.
Yeah. I mean, that is like the magic sauce, truly. That self-love and really learning to kind of tap into that part of ourselves, right? To your point, it is really this like higher vibration, and when we're really able to really embody, right, that self-love, then we're able to tune into our own guidance. And it doesn't necessarily have to be overcomplicated. I think sometimes it can feel very complex, and some people just don't understand what does it mean to like be intuitive or all these things. But I guess for you, what are some of your self-love practices, and how do you support others in connecting with that love within?
I am that observer is there as witness the great majority of the time now. I mean, I would say 80-90% of the time that I'm moving through life, you know, I've cultivated practices as such that I'm able to observe myself moving through life, which is important because when life gets difficult, it's different being right here and suffer and all the suffering and the pain versus like one step out is a profound difference. To observe that, like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm feeling really fearful or anxious right now. Like, yeah. And that might, you know, and then giving yourself, myself, you know, messages of words of mantra that flip the negative, right? So if I hear, oh, you're such a disorganized loser, or so, like something, harsh like that, then I'm like, notice like that's not the true voice. Invite it to go have a seat, and up in the nosebleed section,
go take a bubble bath, like,
and then flip the language to be an affirmation of what does support. Like, like I am, getting more and more organized, and what did I say the other sensation was, like anxiety or fear, whatever it is. It, you're saying about your confidence, about something that's about you doing a good or great job or whatever it is. And it can sound cheesy, right? Like my big false belief in life is that I'm not enough, there's not enough. And so the flip to that is that I am enough, there is abundance, right? And so doing that, and then even mixing that with some sort of physical thing, like these feathers that I wear are represent the physical manifestation of things that, for example, enoughness or abundance, and having a physical reminder or doing a certain movement along with that affirmation. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to access the feeling. And now for the second profound insight is the secret to manifestation is feeling like it's happening now. And there are two things, whether I wouldn't say I really interrogated anyone except maybe my husband. I was mostly interviewing people, and the way that I influence and the way that I would gather information, first of all, I was being present with the individual, and I really cared. Like, I really wanted to know what are they saying? What are they trying to communicate to me? And so I'm listening like it's a dying grandparent's last words. That's one. Seeing people, letting them feel heard. And the second is language. Using language to support what it is that you want. And I think they kind of dismiss, like, oh yeah, we know words are important. But that was really how I got effective results as both an interviewer and converting my own critical voice, which was super loud. And this is how I made change, like believing in it, like cellular, and then moving that into a more even an embodied belief. And that's where you bring in that feeling like it's happening now.
Yeah, that's truly so beautiful, and something that I've been practicing as well, this feeling of the things that I would like to embody. But I think it is one thing to consciously, right, say these affirmations, another to really truly like embody it. So can you walk us through some of those practices in which like you're really able to bring that sensation? Because I feel like I can talk about like, oh, I'm gonna I am rich, like I am beautiful, I am all these things, right? But
I think before there's anything mental, there's the physical. And so one quick practice, or something that I'll use oftentimes to get myself into a more grounded state, is a fusion of teachers that I've had from all around the world, whether it's Bali or India or Italy or England or here. They all have something around breathing, light, or envisioning light, the balance center of the body. And so I'll do a practice, a lot of which I got from one of my breathwork teachers, and I've just tweaked this visualization of imagining a sphere of light at the base of the spine, any color that feels good and right on that day, and in visualizing, inhaling that ball of light up the spine, up to the head, and then back down the center of the body. And there's a sense of, as I connect the breath, so this ball of light is coming up on the inhale, and I'm noticing each vertebrae and kind of blessing it in a sense, and then back down the front of the body, again acknowledging each organ with gratitude, and just breathing in. And then not to complicate it, but if I particularly need extra grounding, I will drop that sense of the light all the way down to the center of the earth and pull the earth, imagine pulling the earth's energy up into myself. And then if I'm in a place where I need a little bit more of the higher mind support, I might imagine it going up to, say, like the soul star in the sky, or something, a light in the sky. But I will say, I'm working with like law enforcement and CEOs and stuff. I do not use this language, but I'll extend it up and like kind of pull from what I envision is my higher self. And again, it's just physical visualizations that help support me going into the state of mind that's going to best help me clear some of the nonsense that can get in the way of, just functioning, feeling optimal.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that practice. And I don't think it's too woo-woo for this audience. I mean, it sounds very similar to like Kundalini, right? This idea of like pulling energy up. So I think it's beautiful that you shared that was your practice, and that you can like not only pull energy from the base of your spine, right, but pull energy from the earth, the air, your spirit guides, right? To be able to know that we are so connected, and we can draw on those that are around us, and they are with us always.
I didn't really answer your question. Things I do, I'm doing some sort of inner practices, oftentimes a few times a day, at least like morning and evening, and then anywhere I need it in between. And it could be short, it could be really long. So but just checking in with myself and doing some sort of embodied practice. And it could be meditation, yoga, or some other movement. Breath work is a big one. Not as often, but sometimes journaling or free writing, morning pages or something. And so some sort of inner body work, but usually meditation and breath work you're pretty much going to find me doing those every day. And sometimes it might look a little different. It might look like that conscientiousness throughout the day as I observe myself and my system. If I start to notice that I'm getting elevated or ungrounded, then I've got some quick practices or things that I do to, like the one I just mentioned to you, to reset myself.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your practices. And I know that Ashira truly is such an amazing breathwork practitioner and guide. I've actually gone to a few of her breathwork classes at Thrive Yoga. And you've guided us through conscious connected breathing specifically, but I know since you've been studying this and practicing this for so long, there's just so many different forms and modalities of breathwork. So would love to learn a little bit more about the modalities that you most prefer to practice in this present moment.
So I will use conscious connected breathing which is you're basically connecting the inhale to the exhale without a pause, whether it's through the nose or the mouth, and you're doing one or the other. Typically, you're not combining them. And I will do that when emotions are high or strong and I really need to clear something. If I'm in a lot of physical pain, I'll do that then also. And that'll also affect the length and intensity with which I do it. So that's what I use for transformation, personal growth, and pain. Now, depending on where I am or what my, heart rate, blood pressure, etc. need, I might engage in coherence, heart-brain coherence breathing, which if you went to the Mayo Clinic website, you could look up and about how that affects the system, especially things like I just said, with blood pressure, lowering that. And so that's just visualizing the breath coming into the nose, going down into the heart, and then out from the heart at equal intervals, somewhere between 4 and 5.5 seconds in and 4 and 5.5 seconds out. So if you do 5 breaths, even like that, that's 1 minute. But optimally, to really get heart and brain in coherence and communicating with one another and becoming one in a sense, that you'd want to do that for 3 minutes. So,
and it's not even that long.
It's just, not that long. If you don't have 3 minutes, do something for 5 minutes a day. If you can't do something for 5 minutes, do it for 3 minutes. If you can't do it for 3 minutes, you gotta do it for 20. If you can't do it for 3, do it for 20. Okay, if you're that. I mean, it is a small commitment to pay attention within. So I'd say those are go-tos. And then sometimes if it's like, if there's a lot of anxiety and there's not a lot of time, exhale fully, hold the breath, and wait past some of the diaphragmatic contractions and discomfort. Then breathe in as slow as possible. And then again, exhale and hold. And that's like a reset button, that kind of breath. And also, it really helps with just flooding the system with oxygen when you do that kind of breath retention. And it's almost like the more discomfort you can create in the body, the more comfortable you're going to be in the world outside. Yeah. So, I also take cold plunge a lot, and just recently I was doing it a couple times a day. And I didn't have a deadline on. I was just gonna maybe do it forever. I don't know, but I mean, I hated it. I mean, I really, every single time, all this resistance and drama in the mind, or running around all of a sudden I had something else to do. Oh, so I would, and I'd just do it for 3 to 5, 6 minutes, something in there. Great. Huberman podcast on that, and with the latest research. And so doing that, and I'm telling you, it was like day 31, and all of a sudden I'm like, God, what's wrong with the water at the condo? Or is there, I was wondering what's happening with my bathtub. Was it because it's summertime, because it felt kind of I don't know, I wouldn't, almost comfortable. Yeah. So then I go with a client to the beach. I do this thing called Live-In Yogi, where I do these private in-home retreats. And so I was with a client in New York at the beach, and nobody's going in because the water was freezing. And I go in, I'm like, wow, this is really comfortable. And all of a sudden it hit me that it wasn't the water was any different. I was different, and something shifted there. But I'll tell you, to get through 30 days of suffering like that, it's really a thing. But I also had a little vanity aspect in there. I was wanting to get rid of brown fat and wanting to increase my mood, and those were motivators also. Just feeling better, sleeping better. Mm-hmm. And I now actually, even though I love hot, really hot water, I also now very rarely do it. I actually need now the shower or the bath cooler than.
That's so interesting.
And I oftentimes will just do cold shower or bath, but when I don't, it's not that much more. And it's because I now have a more physical association of what happens after, and I think that subconsciously has had an effect. So you're just playing around, you're doing things that you listen to stuff, and you take other people's advice, and you discipline yourself to do something, and you stick to it long enough to say something about it. A lot of people, I tried that. I tried meditation, it didn't work for me. Oh, really? And how long did you try that? You try that? Did you even did you try that for more than 5 minutes one time? Like, I would have been one of those people though. And I the only thing is I had an agreement and I wanted to have integrity with my word. So I kept showing up even when it wasn't working. I mean, the first few years I did acupuncture, I thought it was a joke. I'm like, no, there's nothing happening here. And now when I get acupuncture, I literally, something goes in my toe and I'm like, I just felt that. That was my right shoulder right here. And they're like, yeah, or that's this organ. Or, and he's like, that's correct. And it's amazing. You just increase, as, just, I'd say trauma blocked a lot of feeling. And I feel my body so much more now. And I've really increased my sensitivities practicing going within.
So many good nuggets that you shared there. Truly. I think the first thing is really around like we've said before, that discipline, that showing up even on days where you're feeling tired, even on days where you're like actively resisting with your mind, your ego, it doesn't want to step into that cold water, but it's so important to keep doing it until you start noticing those shifts within you. And it takes time. Like, you can't just try it for like 5 minutes and be like, oh, it doesn't work for me. You have to really, truly commit to something, commit to those things. And I mean, you're honestly reminding me that maybe I can give kind of those cold plunges another go. Because I used to be part of my practice and then it just fell off. I think it was because it was winter time when I tried it, and the water gets particularly cold in the winter after a few seconds. But I think, honestly, whenever I did do it, I felt so, so good. So I think it's just a reminder for me to recommit to that. But yes.
I'm so sorry. I can't help but throw this in. The great thing about doing it in the winter though is when you notice, once you get over the mental suffering aspect of that, you'll notice your body, it's kicking on the heat internally from you. So you're going to be able to wear less outside and be more comfortable in the cold throughout the day just from a few minutes in the cold plunge. And that's what's really nice, that when you notice and you sort of emotionally put all the aspects aside, you're like, wow, I'm wearing a t-shirt right now around the house, and normally I need a sweater or a scarf when I go outside, and I'm actually feeling kind of hot. Like, you become your own heater, and then it's like, yeah, I could suffer for a few minutes for a day or two or more of feeling comfortable.
That's so true.
The elements.
And even going back to what you said, like, that suffering is it's very much in our minds.
The suffering.
It's like in our minds, and we we blow it up, and some people make it their reality. They're like, oh, this is like, I'm just suffering, in various aspects. But to your point, if we can kind of reframe it and just even put ourselves in a situation where we're intentionally stressing our minds, our bodies.
Correct.
Yeah,
and if you are uncomfortable, you are probably right on target. I mean, discomfort is a sign that you're often, if you're growing. So it is really, it can be really, although empowering to regain this kind of agency, it can be a uncomfortable to quite painful journey in that. The beauty though is, once you've experienced that pain, it's usually not a repeated thing. It's like you've peeled that layer, and it's just, you might have to deal with other aspects of it, but you have created freedom for yourself in that. And it's a price that every once in a while I daydream about, just being the chick on Xanax and numbing out on my phone or whatever, with this is really, the peace is true. It's not some false sense. I'm not looking for things in the outside world to create the joy anymore.
Yeah, you're looking within, you're cultivating that within yourself.
Yeah.
And that leads to transformation in your life and the lives of the people that you surround yourself with.
You're a business owner who cares more about people than profits, although you still want to make some money, of course. And that can feel mighty lonely. That's why I created Feminist Founders, a podcast that explores how to build a more equitable world through entrepreneurship. I'm Becky Mollenkamp, a coach and journalist, and I'm excited to bring you stories of people who, like you and me, are trying to change the business landscape for good. Check out Feminist Founders wherever you listen to podcasts.
Going back to something from your bio and something we've been talking about throughout, like you have a gift for reading and you've cultivated that in a professional capacity, but also in your personal life, I'm guessing, as well as your work as an intuitive healer. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what does it mean to read somebody, and feel free to sprinkle in some stories about times that you've read clients or other people.
Really challenging my memory here. Sometimes I feel like I'm so right here, right now, that I'm like, what happened this morning? I know you guys can relate. So reading people, in a way, I was always doing that. I actually was doing that so deeply. It was how I navigated life. I couldn't feel my own body or emotions, which I have had dozens of surgeries over my life. So like several dozen, and that I believe affected the level in which I could feel myself. And so I read others. I would ask others how they're feeling. I would feel how others were feeling, and I would read the aspects that they had to offer. And when there was also, though, intentional training. I mean, I remember, I think my work began when I was in grad school and I began interning in the FBI's behavioral science unit. And I was working on a project called psycholinguistic analysis of written threat communication. We're basically on a continuum of analyzing written threat letters from Joe Schmo to celebrities or blowing up the Super Bowl or whatever, and analyzing personality type by the words, how the handwriting and a few other aspects. So began to see this aspect of the written communication, and then being trained in micro expressions and body language by a company, and which I did I analyzed video of people to identify deception or hostile intent in order to help with creating programs like facial recognition software, so that when you go through the airport, they're not just randomly pulling people anymore, they're pulling people who are showing signs of fear or rage or things like that, right? And that was something I did as an independent contractor while I was with the government in different roles. And so there was official training, and then it was also really just enhancing my own skills so that I had a reason that didn't seem crazy to people as to why I knew the things that I knew. So that they would just say, oh, well, she's a face and body language expert, and it would seem less weird. But a lot of it was really having an excuse for why I had certain intuition. An example from when I was in the academy, in the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, I remember we had this exercise we weren't told about, and we were in the scenario, and somebody came up to me to ask me a question, and I took them down to the ground and restrained them. And the teacher came over and she was like, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, she was about to pull a knife on me." And she's like, "How did you know that?" And there was this whole thing because they thought I had cheated and like somehow found the script for whatever was happening or whatever. But what happened was I actually saw in her mind what she was about to do.
Wow.
And it could have been that I saw it in her mind because I don't know why I'm making excuses right now, because I created it. This is what I'd tell a non-woo person, because I saw a twitch of a shoulder or like going back for something, I mean, but the reality is I saw what I believe she saw.
Yep.
And I reacted to that intuitively. And that's actually how I won or gone far in a lot of poker tournaments. You know, being a semi-pro poker player for about 10 years, which was over 10 years ago now. Just played a handful of times since. But it was that kind of thing would happen too, where it was like as though people were playing with their cards face up.
Wow.
Or more recently, what happened a few years ago when I went to play just to see how I was doing, how I would do, you know, I was feeling people's bodies. So like I remember this guy was equal stacked with Put Me All in this tournament, and it was during COVID time, so he's got glasses, a mask, and a lot of clothes on, and I didn't have any real visual cues. And I just sat there and I was thinking, I wasn't sure what to do. And all of a sudden I felt afraid. I thought, why am I feeling afraid? Like, I'm not. And I was like, oh, he's afraid. And I was feeling his body, but, you know, it had been a while since I had played. And I just was like, I call, you know, and knocked him out. But when you're really present with somebody, you're going to pick up a lot on them. I remember giving a talk to 100-some women in this local area about how to read people and influence them in a sense to get what you want. And I'm not trying to like teach about manipulation. It's an interesting way to draw people in, but really what I have to teach there is the key aspects of being present and listening, really deeply listening, of knowing your own body, and you know, being observant of theirs. Like if you're just with somebody and you're there, you're fully present with them, you're going to get a lot of information. You don't need to know any skills. You don't need to know about mirroring and anchoring and doing things that can influence people. You can just be like care. I said observing them, but that's actually not really what I meant, because that kind of falls under the deep listening and being present, but about just accessing your own heart.
That's good. Ooh, so many interesting stories there around just the things that, I mean, the gifts that you naturally have. And in some ways, like your training was a little bit of that like excuse, that cover what have you, right? To be like, in certain situations, to be like, I understand what's going on.
Yeah, you know, here's the thing for people. We all have the gift of intuition. We might have it different ways. Some people might hear it more, other people might feel it more or see it more. And you know, about the different clairs, I don't even know what they all are, but I will say that if you practice being with yourself and listening to yourself and listening to your yeses and nos, it just expands from there. Listening to and honoring your body's natural boundaries and guidance, it continues to grow and enhance. And again, by listening to yourself, creating that safety, like you can receive all sorts of messages. If your body doesn't feel safe, the mind's going to be a bit busy. You're not going to be able to hear so readily. And then that's where, and it's through the body as a portal where we get a lot of these communications. And then, and to the mind, just the practice of going within is an organic way to develop your own intuition about situations, and then practice them in safe situations.
Yeah.
You know, with your friends or the person at the checkout counter, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we even did this last time we chatted, or a few times ago, but you showed me one of the ways in which you practice asking yes and no. Can you share with the audience?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So originally, when I started practicing yes and no, I had to use a pendulum because I was, nervous about like that I wouldn't be able. It was a fear of failure that I might not be able to do it, and so it was somehow a little bit easier to have a physical manifestation. And so I practiced neutrality, so I wouldn't influence. And so I would use the pendulum and I would ask it, show me yes, show me no. And there are more things that go along with that, but that's the basic idea there. And more recently though, I would say if for most people they can even skip that aspect and go right to the body, let body as pendulum. And because that was just me moving through my own fears. So a little validation for anybody who's like, I don't know if I could do that. Like, yeah, I feel you. But I just say, ask sort of the universe, show me what's in my highest and best interest in this situation. Is it in my best interest to go attend this thing this weekend? And then I just pause and I feel, and I feel within. And if I feel my breath sort of full and expanding, or a forward leaning sense, or an uplifting sense, like that's a yes for me. But even if I don't know what the yes is, then I might say, confirm with opposite. And then I feel the opposite of that. So oftentimes the opposite of that is like feeling off balance, being pulled backwards, feeling very heavy and pulled down. And that confirms for me what the yes is, right? The yes feels open, expansive, and good. The no feels like heavy, weighted, shallower breathing, So just noticing the physical sensations when asking for guidance. And people's could be unique, but if you notice what the feeling is and then you say confirm with opposite, then it can really define for you what your yes and no is.
I started practicing it actually after you showed me it. And I noticed that for me, my yes tends to be the sense of like stability, groundedness. I'm balanced. And no is, to your point, usually like leaning backwards or leaning forwards, but it's like going off balance, off kilter. Something doesn't feel right. But I also want to gauge whether or not, to your point, there's a sense of like maybe expansiveness and lightness with certain yeses. And I definitely want to try confirming with no as well, but I think that's incredible.
Confirm with opposite is what you would say. Yeah.
Yes. In terms of kind of reading, you did mention it is very much like a practice, but are there any tips you can share with us, or even like small things we can start paying attention to whenever we are in someone else's presence?
Can you give me a scenario with a little bit more context or an example so I could answer from that perspective?
Sure.
So broad.
Yeah. So say I'm dating.
Okay.
I'm on a date. How might I read somebody? How might I read how they're responding to my energy?
So I'm sorry if this is going to feel anything other than super exciting to people, but here's how simple it can be. You begin by noticing yourself. You already have the answer within you. So not that I'm being cliche or anything. So it's about noticing within. Am I comfortable? Am I uncomfortable? And then there's a level of discomfort, right? Like sometimes when you're working out, there's a burn, but like know it's a good thing.
Yeah.
There's a difference between the burn and that struggle and pain. Like when the body is like saying no, versus the body saying, I really don't want to do this.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing in dating. Like maybe it's just awkward and uncomfortable and you're not really sure yet. But how is your body? I remember sometime back in the day, I was talking with a guy, I was on a date, and I really couldn't tell how I felt. But then I observed myself, right? I stepped back and I was kind of watching myself, just again with unattachment, without emotion, without wanting a result. So practicing neutrality is really important because as the observer, you literally just want to be witness. You're not trying to influence. And I observed that I was leaning into him. And it was slight and subtle, but to me that was saying there was a part of me that felt comfortable enough to have neck exposed, body leaning forward. So at least I knew instinctually there was likely a safety in this connection because my body was okay with that. I will say it's important we work on clearing our own challenges and traumas, because we can accidentally, like let's say we haven't cleared an abuse pattern from childhood, then we might be drawn to, we often go into relationship with one of our parents. All right, so take a look at whoever you're dating or married to, and is it your mom or your dad, and I'm sorry, this, right? So, and if there was something there, you might be drawn to someone who is replicating those characteristics, and there's a subconscious attempt to reenact and replay, redo that feels comforting to the system. So it's important we recognize where we might have bias. So I'm saying that generally you might find that you can follow that, and just keep an eye on yourself. Do I have, if you have a habit pattern of choosing unsafe partner, then you may be mindful of that as well. I still feel like the body's going to let you know, because it's more likely that the mind or the ego will attempt to come in and override and say, yeah, like this guy's really great, but the body is contracting, the shoulders are coming in, the chest is, there's a subtle protection to the body language. You're feeling that. Again, there could be something where you feel protective in general. So that may be a safe person, and you're contracting because that you're feeling scared in the world. So we want to keep in mind that, how, like, to keep doing loving things, inward things, mind body practices for ourselves. Again, 3 minutes, 5 minutes a day is enough. As we find out, just watching your breath is enough to begin to shift and create safety in the mind and body. Because when you're feeling that way, you are likely to be able to trust your read. If you're already charged in your system, then you're going to need to find a neutral place before you gauge. So maybe that's the answer here. Be able to be the non-judgmental, unattached observer, and then gauge what you're observing in your own system to identify the yes and no in relationship. And the other I'll give you a quick thing. I mean, I don't know, this isn't really a lesson though. I mean, sure. I'll just say that if you want to identify a no in relationship, and by reading people, by reading the face, one of the easiest facial expressions to identify is the most negative, and it's like kind of worse than hate, is contempt. And contempt is easy to identify because it's the only expression limited to one side of the face. Oh. So if you see, like if you're talking to somebody and they're, they show some sort of a quick flash, like a sneer. I mean, this is also disgust. So, but I mean, if you see, just one side of the face kind of flashing like that, you might think of maybe it looked like judgment or something like that. Like that contemptuous look, you're going to want that person to go ahead and do more work before you're really dating them. Those are some of the expressions that some of the original, the key researchers in this area identified when being able to predict long-term relationship success was observing this contempt expression in interaction. So,
and the fact that it happens on one side of the face, I mean, you're just
I mean, it's like you really have to be tuned in. You really have to be paying attention. You have to be really present to notice those things. But I guess since we're on the topic of dating, do you have any tips or pointers for noticing when someone is flirting with you? Like, say you're at a bar and like you strike up a conversation.
I mean, you're looking for. I mean,
not just like dating advice. I guess.
I mean, there's so many caveats.
Yeah.
When one of the things that, if somebody's being obvious versus not, I mean, social skills right now are lower than ever before because of all of the online stuff and electronics, and people aren't engaging as much with other people. You and I are able to make a lot of eye contact because there's a lot of health in our systems, and we're aware of the importance of eye gazing and things like that. With the, from a trauma standpoint, we say brief, frequent eye contact. So you might, create a lot of comfort by doing just that, right? There are visual things that you can identify. There are sounds you can identify. I mean, we could just say an increase in eye contact, right? When somebody likes you, they kind of like hanging out and looking at you in a way. So there might be a longer hold, but of course if it's more than, what do they say, like 6 or 7 seconds, then you might want to admit them for a psychological thing, unless of course you're into all this hippie stuff, in which case you're probably doing an eye gazing.
Yeah, that's fair.
When you're seeing openness and vulnerability, when people expose themselves, palms might be out, chest might be forward, neck, head might be up a little bit, neck more exposed, right? If you take everything back to primal times, even like hips kind of forward, feet faced your direction as opposed to towards the door. I mean, you don't want to take any one sign as meaning anything, but when you have a cluster of behaviors that are indicating, maybe the voice is a little deeper, and maybe they're holding certain vowels a little bit longer, then and you're also you might feel it in your body, and it's going to be and this is why it's important to know you're neutral, and to sometimes be able to put your own feelings aside. I mean, if you develop trust within yourself, if you say, I am not going to eat cookies today, it matters if you do eat cookies or you don't eat cookies that day, because one of them fosters deeper trust with yourself and the other one goes, I'm not sure if I can trust myself. So I am currently very careful about what I say I'm going to do or not do to myself, for myself, because even the trust that we create with ourselves as we're in a bar and we're engaging with another, we do need to know our neutral, know how we feel, and then we're going to be able to pick up on what's really true or what might be colored by our own past a little more easily. So, I mean, I want to just say feel yourself, but we sometimes that's a work in progress. So, I'm just high level basics, right? They're leaning into you a little more. You're seeing more teeth, but not just like an upper lip, you're like there's when a genuine smile, you're going to see the lower face and you're going to see the eyes light up, because when you really genuinely smile, there's a contraction around the eyes. There's going to be some squinting and crow's feet, and that is a genuine happiness, as opposed to a politician's smile, which is just going to be movement in the lower half of the face, so sometimes people might be in certain moods. So again, you're looking for clusters of behavior, and pulling in how you feel in your body can really enhance or reaffirm what you're seeing as well.
I mean, this is so I'm sure this is helpful for me, but I'm sure it's going to be helpful for the audience as well. It's so interesting starting to put all these data points together, because it's not just like I observed this, therefore this. It's noticing that cluster, that constellation, where you can put all the data together and have a pretty solid read. But to your point, we have to know what our neutral is, because I've noticed, for instance, for myself, that I have had a pattern of dating people in which I am attempting to quote unquote save. And that is not a pattern I would like to repeat. So I'm glad I'm able to be conscious of that as I re-enter the dating space. That way I can better gauge my own bodily sensations and understand like what neutral is. But I think that's one of the toughest things, like getting back to neutral.
Yeah, so I'll just say, what I might do with that for me, I'd look at the deeper meaning about why do I want to save someone, and it often comes back to us wanting to heal our own inner child.
Yeah.
And if just the recognition with the intention can begin to undo that triangle of perpetrator, victim, hero. Mm-hmm. Because if you're the hero and they're the victim, there's always a perpetrator, and it's a continuous thing. So you begin to break that apart with intention and observation alone, because you recognize I have compassion for wanting to help this person, because there was a time I needed help and I didn't get it. And I also understand that everybody has their own journey, and we are, peers here, or, you start to, with compassion, you see that side of yourself, and it's really quite easy to shift something in the sense of having the intention and recognition when this is happening. That alone can do some powerful things.
Yeah, that's so true. And even going back to this triangle of perpetrator, and you said what? Perpetrator,
victim, hero.
Yeah, it's really interesting to even think about that. It is a triangle. I didn't even think about, I guess, the perpetrator in that situation. It felt very much like hero, victim. But even having that awareness now makes me feel like I am able to start unwinding. I feel like, to your point, already having that awareness makes me that much more equipped to go into the dating world and realize I don't think I will. I don't think I will repeat that.
Well, and then an affirmation to just reinforce that, I make healthy choices and decisions in relationship. And honoring someone's journey, and that you don't have to save them. That's not your job. And so, and a mantra of, I make healthy choices.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's so true. And even going back to something you were saying around honoring yourself, I feel like a big part of honoring yourself is saying the things that you want to do and doing them, committing to them. And I feel like that's a practice I've reinvested in for myself, because I've noticed for me, sometimes I have a tendency to overcommit, or I'll say I'm going to do something, or I'll say I'm going to try. But when I try, it's for me, I'm trying to let go of that language. It's I do it or I don't do it. It's not I try to do it.
Yeah, you can drop try from your vocab, basically, because, you're right on with that.
Mm-hmm. To wrap up this conversation, what is next for you, Ashira? What's next on your personal journey, professional journey, feather journey?
Yeah. So I would say that, I'm ramping up to teach a breathwork training, and for, just teaching people how to facilitate breathwork, continuing to help people with, transformation and stress management, and also selling these feathers, which is the most beautiful story of a friend of mine in Bali who this supports 70 plus different families, and helped women get their kids out of single moms out of orphanages, and help organic mom and pop farms. And so there's some really beautiful stories and support around these feathers and their sustainability, and just love creating things. And so that's it. Healing work and feathers, maybe a little bit of business consulting on the side to just help people with, taking their helping them energetically, in a sense, with their businesses, the same way with their emotional health, their business health too. And that's where we are right now.
And I love where you are right now. I'm just so amazed by your story and how it's led you to where you are today, and being in a place where you're able to help so many people, and also to start selling these beautiful pieces of jewelry. Like, truly,
show
these are
amazing,
stunning. I love them so much. And I was actually telling Ashira before this podcast that I've been just seeing feathers everywhere. I've been seeing them in my dreams in real life. Like, I do feel like I meant to. Ashira knows this. I know I meant to purchase at least a pair, if not multiple pairs.
Yeah, your hair, your ears, do it all.
I know. Well, thank you so much, Ashira. This is so wonderful.
Jenny.
Where can people get in touch with you?
Through my website, mindbodyfusion.com. And, they can, I think my phone number's on there. You can text me or you can write me through the website. And I also teach several classes a week right now at Thrive Yoga, and breathing yoga and stretching. So I would love to hear from anybody for any needs, physical, psychological, spiritual, or feather related, for the hair, for the ears. And I want to thank you, Jenny. I mean, your memory is incredible, the things that we discussed, and how you're able to access those and just stay in the flow, and just really show up with your wonderful energy and wanting to share with people ways to just help them be a more integrated human being is a really beautiful goal, and I feel fortunate to know and have had your support today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for those kind words. I'm so excited for this episode to get aired, and I'd like to give you a hug. Yay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.